Thanks for staying around. It must be late for some people, so I appreciate that. So before I begin with this talk, there's like one idea that I want to put in your mind that kind of explains the motivation behind this project, and it's like how much value can we create by connecting existing dots, right? That's like the whole motivation of this project. And so, well, for those who don't know me, well, what you need to know is that for like I was very lucky that for the last 10 years, I have been able to work in this very small intersection between open source, education, and desktop technologies. Today, I'm still a member of Sugar Labs, and I'm a member of the GNOME Foundation as well. So what are these dots that I'm talking about? The first one is Sugar. In case you never heard of it, it's a desktop for Linux. But it was especially designed for kids to learn. It is also a huge set of learning tools that are also especially designed for the same goal. Both Sugar and the apps are based on completely different paradigms compared to, let's say, GNOME. Two examples of that is that kids do not access directly to the file system, but instead they use this abstraction called the journal, which is basically a record of all the activities that they do, and they don't really need to think about files and things like that. The other is that collaboration is deeply embedded in the user experience. So things like sharing files or doing activities collaboratively, it's very easy to do. It was originally released in 2006 as part of the One Laptop per Child project, but since 2008, it has its own community, and it's been maintained since then. The other dot, and since this is a beginner's talk, I will be I will oversimplify things a little bit. But so the other dot is Flatpak, and depending on who you ask, right? So for users, Flatpak is a better way to manage your app. This means that searching for apps, installing apps, running and updating your apps. And the nice thing is that no matter what Linux distribution you are using, as long as it supports Flatpak, you can run the exact same apps and they will behave exactly the same. And more importantly is that your apps can run more secure compared to other ways of doing this. And if you're a developer, it is a better way to package and distribute your apps. And the nice thing is that you can only need to build this once, and it will guarantee that it will run consistently in any other Linux distribution that supports Flatpak. And the very important thing to mention is that it's a lot easier compared to other ways to do this. Something that I like about Flatpak is that it's a distributed system. This means that many organizations can have their own backend and repository, and like a list of apps. So we have, like, for example, the endless one, Fedora, but there's a very special one among specials, which is called Flatpak. And for a user, it's an online store where you can download your apps. And for developers, it's a platform that gives you everything you need to distribute your applications and to maintain your applications over time. And for both users and developers, it's a very nice community to be part of. So how am I connecting these things? And here's like the premise. So we have Sugar Labs that has hundreds of learning tools, but though most of those only work inside Sugar because they are based on completely different paradigms. And also we have technologies like Flatpak and platforms like Flathub that allows to reach a much bigger audience. So the premise is, the desktop and Linux in general can benefit for all these apps that Sugar has done over the last 14 years. And at the same time, Sugar can benefit from reaching a much wider audience. So the way that I solve this problem is basically just created a small toolkit that actually allows Sugar applications to run in the desktop, and it just gives you it's a very small library, and just gives you like a wrapper GTK application that acts as a middleman between the Sugar world and the desktop world, and it gives you some tools that you can use to replace functionalities that do not exist in the desktop world, but they do in Sugar, and therefore these applications expect to have. And it also generates almost automatically all the metadata necessary for, let's say, packaging your application in Flatpak. So how much value have we created with this project? Well, here's basically a summary so far, and there's good reason why there's actually not more so far. We have 20 apps that were already ported, very unique apps. And I'm gonna talk very briefly about every of these 20 apps now, but I also want just to share a little bit like the experience of how this project started and how it's going to move forward as I do the explanation. So this basically started in October 2009. I had a lot of free time in my hands, and this is something that I really wanted to do since a few years now. And I just prototyped the idea of how this will work. And a few weeks later, I was visiting Barcelona for the Linux App Summit. And I shared this with many ex-colleagues from Endless and some friends for the GNOME community, and they kind of like it as well. Never some extra validation. Never do any harm. Even while I was still there, they helped me with some very early reviews and helped me with some technical issues. And maybe a week later, after I came back home, we already published the first two apps, right? One is one Abacus, which is literally what the name says, but it has many different representations, and this really interesting, to expose kids to this, because they can see very fundamental concept of computation, like how information gets represented and how arithmetics works in these different representations. The other one, it's called Music Keyboard, and basically turns the kid's computer into a piano, right? But you can select different instruments, and you can record and share these, your masterpieces with your friends. So after I got the first two applications published in the Flathub, I spent some time writing decent but complete documentation on how to reproduce this, and I signed in the Google Code in with Sugar Labs, and we did something kind of clever. We created tasks for these kids to choose any application they wanted, and they had to basically port it and port this app and then publish to Flathub, right? But to do that, they will first need to port the app to Python 3 if that it was required, and also port GTK2 apps to GTK3. And yes, there are still GTK2 apps in this world, believe it or not, and we have a lot of those. But it is amazing the amount of work that we did. At the same time, we fixed a lot of bugs because we wanted to make this app work as better as we could, and we fixed many bugs. And some of these applications did not have a release for years and or many months. So we make it work with newer versions of GTK and things like that. So it was very very positive as well for the upstream community. So let me put your seatbelt because I'm gonna go really fast here. I'm just gonna show you like all the applications that we actually got to publish in Flathub in this phase. Okay, this is Char. It's basically an application that lets kids import data and visualize the data. It's like very nice to just have like the very first steps about data visualization. The next one, Color Deductor is just a game about recognizing patterns, but it is also about writing code that generates those patterns. So it's very interesting. This code in low means that this application was completely ported from Python 2 to 3 to GTK 2 to 3, and also publishing Flathub like 100% by our students. Dimensions, it's another like very nice app that is about finding pairs of cards that matches some pattern, and it's just a very basic applications for a game for training, exercising pattern matching. Finance, it's well, like to learn how to do finance, you have to do it right. So what this application does is allows the kid to actually manage a real budget, so they can basically manage their own budget and at home, and they learn by doing like the real thing. Fully functional. This is a photo tool. It was originally designed for for kids to create comics, but if we think about like present day, I think it's more of a meme generator by today's standards. So maybe some kids can create the next biggest meme with this. So fraction bounds, the name says it all, but it's an application where kids can understand or learn the concepts of fraction and percentages by basically bouncing this ball, and that has to land in any specific, like 1/4 or 50%. It's very simple, but it's nice. Implode is just a Tetris-like game, but it's this represents a kind of a family of apps that there is in Sugar that like tries to exercise the problem, the problem-solving abilities. And the next one is basically the same, but the scenario is a maze. So it can be very, very hard. Like, I mean, this is aimed for kids, of course, but if any of you want to download this and go like to the maximum complexity level, you will be blown away. Okay, another app is Measure, and this is also one of my favorites. It basically takes the microphone as a sensor, and it can help you visualize the sounds or voices, in these waves. And it can also be used for tuning instruments and things like that. Something nice about it is that you can, the kids can record this data, and then, for example, like import it in the Char app, and they can, see the data that was, stored, censored. Memorize. At first sight, it seems like just the classic memorize game where you have these cards and you have to flip and find like the pairs. But actually, this is a tool for creating those games. So kids can create their own games. They can define them like card pairs, like use images, sounds, and text to speech, and so they can create those games and then share to their friends. Physics is literally just a physics sandbox, so kids can build the structures or machinery, and then have the time of their lives just destroying everything. It's really fun. And this is I have to say, this is my #1 favorite. It's called Pipi, and it's very powerful Python editor. What it's really nice about it is that it works very nice. It's very simple, and it comes with a lot of tutorials for making games and even GTK apps. Another really good one, read eText. It does a lot of things. It allows the kids to search for books from these like public domain libraries, and they can download the book. And this has this functionality where you have this robot read the book for you in many different languages. So it's really, really good. Yeah, side rule. It's another example of how Sugar. There's a phrase that says that for learning something, you have to learn it in more than one way. And Sugar has a lot of applications that teach you the same thing, but just with a different tool, right? To this purpose. So yeah, this app lets you do real arithmetic calculations. There's Speak. It's basically a speech synthesizer with a face, but it has some very nice features, like you can customize the face of the robot here, and also you can actually use your face to do that. It comes with a chatbot called Alice, and it has a very funny sense of humor. So yeah, I already tested this with many kids, and they love it. Another one, it's called Story. This is about presenting kids with a random sequence of random images. So they have to write a story that connects like all these images. So it's funny because a lot of silly stories emerge from the process, and it's really nice. Another interesting one, Turtle in a Pond. Like if you look at it, and I have to admit that I have to improve the documentation, but the first side is a game about not letting the turtle escape from the pond, but it actually is about writing code to make the turtle smarter. And how you do this? So you can use BP to write the code, and then you import it here, so you can actually test your algorithm to see how much smarter you made the turtle to be. And the last one, this is basically it's a dictionary, but it's also like a very simple translator, and it can also be used to learn how to spell the different words in the different languages that supports. So yeah, the phase 2 kind of finished around February, and at that point we ported so many different apps that this thing like is starting to converge, right? So we kind of know like what was the all the different things that we needed. But the manifest, which is the recipe that you use to create the Flatbacks, I mean, they were still a little bit messy. So I had like a good advice from Bilal and other FlatHub admins, and so I created a base app, and I moved like all the common pieces there. And like I don't know if you can see, you can actually read what's in this image, but that's the full manifest for a general Sugar app. It's very clean and very simple to understand, so it should be a lot easier now to both maintain and to port new applications. And in the process, I also updated to a newer GNOME runtime. And after COVID, we had a lot of new releases of apps because of all the work, all the amazing work that these students did. So I also updated all of that. And so moving forward, yeah, so one thing, like a kind of imminent thing that I have to do is to update the tutorial, because it is so much easier now to port this application. So I need to update that. And now that I have data, thanks to FlatHub, I kind of know what are the most kind of more attractive or popular applications, because there are hundreds of applications in Sugar, and of course I don't have the time to do it all by myself, so I have to prioritize. But yeah, the one that you see in here, it's called Music Painter, and it's literally what the name says, you paint music. And yeah, that's the next one that I'm thinking about. So conclusions, we have 20 new unique learning tools. So far, over 6K downloads. Of course, that doesn't mean there's 6K new users, but maybe something in between. I receive a lot of valuable feedback from Flatpak maintainers, people from the community, users, and it's been very, very useful. And on a kind of personal note, for me, for those who know me, they know that how important Sugar is for me, right? And to me, this is like a personal attempt, to preserve the legacy of what Sugar did and does, right? And there are many developers in the Sugar community, did different things, like for example, Sugarizer, which is a complete rewrite of Sugar, but for the web, right? But I think that this is my way of preserving this legacy. And well, that was it. And thank you. And I don't know, let's check the questions if there are any.
Thank you, Martin, for presentation. Yeah, you can find the questions in Etherpad.
Okay, Etherpad. Okay. Are there any academic research done regarding actual usage of Sugar learning tools by pupils? How effective they are, and what could be better of conscience? Well, I'm not sure if there are like direct specifically for individual applications, but because of the one laptop per child, there's a lot of evaluations like in different countries, and they have very different results depending on the country. You have great countries like Uruguay when they use Sugar like a lot, and you have other countries where by different reasons they could not really use it. So I think I don't have like a paper that I can point to at the moment, but I know the people who do, so I can point you to them. Yeah, the UI framework. Yeah, I forgot to mention this, but both the Sugar desktop and the applications are written in GTK and Python. So yeah, it wasn't something completely alien to port these things. How are games selected as candidates for porting for Flatpak? Well, so far they only now I do have data, right? Just basic data from the feedback that I'm getting, and also from the stats that I use from Flatpak. But at least for the free and initial phases, my criteria was, what is there in Sugar that it doesn't exist, not even remotely, in outside of Sugar, right? So that was kind of my criteria. But now I have more data to move. Then yeah, sure, let's get in touch. Yeah, the Plan Ceval has research on using Sugar apps for learning. Yes, that is what I'm saying. Like big projects and very successful projects like Plan Ceval in Uruguay have a lot of information. All right. There's another question emerging. Newcomers contributors. Well, basically all the students from Google Code In were newcomers contributions. So they, yeah. And of course, if someone is interested in help me with these projects, you're more than welcome. And trust me, I already did most of the heavy lifting for this, so I can promise you to have more fun. And okay, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone.